So hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations for Charity. I'm Christine Noble-Seller. I'm the creator and host of this online guest speaker series for animal and nature lovers that's now in its second year. I am privileged to work as a professional animal and nature communicator, and I support families, animals in care, in sanctuaries and shelters, wildlife and nature. And today I'm joining you from my home here in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. This series that's been running for 2 years now is part of what I call sacred activism, or part of my volunteer service to advance intuitive interspecies communication and to raise awareness and consciousness and funds for ethical animal, wildlife, and nature organizations such as Ecofluency. So I am extremely grateful for your interest, support, and for those of you that are here today, whether you're here live or watching the replay. Our conversation today, as you know, is about nature communication, the science, art, and magic beyond animal communication. And I'm delighted and honored to formally introduce our guest speaker who's joining us from the UK today, Dr. Saskia von Diest of Ecofluency. I'd like to share some words from Saskia herself. I believe nature communication is a critical skill for future resilience and a fundamental and vital resource for harmonious relationship with all life. After completing my PhD in plant pathology in 2013, I held 2 collaborative postdoctoral fellowships with Stellenbosch University in South Africa and with Coventry University in the UK from 2014 to 2020. I investigated quantum-based or subtle agricultural techniques and technologies that use sound, electromagnetics, catalytic substances, and human intuitive abilities in farm management decision-making. I finally founded Ecofluency in early 2021. I used my 12 years of experience in teaching and facilitating on different fields and in various forms to be a facilitator, educator, researcher, and activist in this field, presenting my work in various ways on numerous international platforms. I offer consultations with nature, do energetic clearings for people, land, and organizations, and teach others to communicate with nature. All my work is offered to individuals and to groups and organizations and is presented in person and online. Part of my work and passion is also supporting other voices in this critical field. Ecofluency is organically and gently growing into an organization to promote the science, art, and practical magic of nature communication worldwide for individual and collective transformation and evolution. Welcome, Saskia.
Thank you so much, Christine, for having me, and thank you to everybody for joining on the call.
So, as everyone who has registered, and I'm grateful for their participation, 100% of the net proceeds from this conversation are going to support Ecofluency. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with Ecofluency and how this donation will support the work of Ecofluency?
Absolutely. So I'm not registered as a charity, and so I don't receive the benefits that normally charities would receive. But I do a lot of pro bono work, and a lot of my work is also offered, in fact, all my online work in terms of online courses and consultations are offered on a pay-what-you-can basis, which means that, and this started in November last year, that it felt appropriate that I start doing it this way. So it makes this work more accessible to more people. So sometimes there will be people like, for example, in one of the September 6-week online courses, I've got 2 cohorts, one on a Tuesday evening and one on a Wednesday morning. And the Tuesday evening group is now full. And there are 3 people who have booked on today on a pay-what-you-can basis. And while most people would still pay more or less the same what I would have previously charged, these people aren't able to. So they will pay only a fraction of the cost that I would have normally charged for the course. So then something like this, for example, helps to cover the cost of my time. And like we all have bills. It means that my spirit team still look after me and I still have my needs met in beautifully synchronistic ways. Even though I don't always get what I want, I get what I need. And sometimes what I need happens in very magical ways.
Thank you, Saskia. And so thank you to everyone here who has registered for the conversation, because you are bringing more nature communication to more people. So I'd like to just share some brief housekeeping so that you can make best use of today for those who have not been to a conversation before. Saskia and I will start by having a conversation. It's really an interview, but I like to call it a conversation about nature communication to cover the key points that you saw those questions when you registered. And then we want you to join in the conversation. We'll invite you into a Q&A where your questions, your comments, your sharing about another experiential exercise that Saskia is going to lead us through. All of those are welcome. And then we'll wrap up today with Saskia's current news about any offerings that some of you may be interested in, a reminder of what to expect after today, what's coming in the email tomorrow, and then we'll close with a group thank you and goodbye. So I'm just going to mute the chat here just for now. We'll open that back up at the Q&A. If you have any questions or comments that arise while you hear Saskia and I speaking, please jot them down and bring them forward when we open the Q&A. So, nature communication, the science, art, and magic beyond animal communication. So we have some people here who are, I know, animal communicators, people who communicate with nature, both. So I'd love to hear more about your journey, Saskia, and learn more about you, because this is the first time we've actually ever met. And we were saying before the call how surprised we are that we have actually not met until now. So we're very grateful for that. So can you tell us about how your own work, Saskia, has grown from animal communication? It sounds like that's where it started, to communication with other aspects of nature.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And what I also want to mention is that you did such a beautiful job of reading the bits about what it was in my words, and you edited it so lovely. And I'm realizing how I really need to update the way I talk about my work. But it's still applicable. So because of my background in agriculture, when I first came across animal communication, right from the beginning, I was interested in how it could be used, interspecies communication could be used with many other aspects of nature. But for the first 1.5 to 2 years, I mostly practiced animal communication, occasionally having conversations with plants and insects and microbes and so on out of curiosity, but wanting to build up confidence and accuracy by practicing in peer groups with animals to begin with. And then over the years, I've also done workshops and courses and trainings in plant and tree communication, nature spirits, land healing or geomancy, ancestral healing, including becoming a facilitator in family constellations, Reiki and psychic surgery, and various other fields or areas within the wider field of bridging and healing the human relationship with nature. And what I started to realize is that the principles of communication are the same across the board. So now I teach a 9-step set of guidelines, which is like the beginners, like any animal communicator would look at that and be like, oh, that's so basic. Yeah, exactly, because it's applicable across the board. And it doesn't matter whether that being has a central nervous system or even a physical body. Two-way communication happens because of, well, we don't really know what the underlying mechanism is. But the point is that I lost interest in how it actually works and just stayed interested in that it works and that it's practically useful. So my scientist brain, as a recovering academic, I had to let go of the need to understand exactly what's going on there. And it grew to the point where I realized there's so many fantastic animal communicators in the world. I'm going to let them do that job, especially because many people choose to stay focused on domestic and or wild animals. And then there are some people who focus on plants and trees and so on. And like not even a handful of people that I know about who focus on microbes or insects even. And so I thought, okay, I'll stay a generalist, but then I'm going to focus on the things that are slightly more niche, but still stay in nature communication, because I believe that that's really at the core. Communication in general is fundamental to any relationship. And if I can teach people or remind them, rekindle their innate ability, because as many of us know, something that all of us have, it's our birthright. It's up to us whether and how we want to reclaim it. So that's part of the passion that I have is really, I don't want to be a consultant. I love doing it, I really do. But my goal is to make myself redundant in that by teaching people to have the skills themselves. Stay with me. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if that were the case, if more of the world were communicating with nature, we wouldn't have the multitude of issues that we'd have now. And people would be happier, they'd be leading more holistic lives, they'd be healthier, and the rest of nature would also be happier, healthier, and so on, more whole. And so that's where it really went to, was just understanding that some people need plant communication. Some people need me to communicate with an animal who's about to pass, or an animal that has passed, or a tree that's about to be cut down in their garden, or their entire farm. Maybe they need me to communicate with their ancestors. Maybe what they're needing is a direct dialogue with their microbes in their gut. Maybe they would like to communicate with where they originally came from, like their soul star or group soul. I'm not really sure what the right terminology for it is. So the point is that I developed my skills enough so that I could be a generalist while retaining some level of accuracy and confidence to be able to do so, while still acknowledging that 10 years in, I'm still totally a beginner. And I never call myself an expert. Even though I've had shamanic training, I've had training to be a facilitator and so on, I'll never call myself a shaman or even a therapist. At best, I'm a facilitator and I can be a teacher. And I talk about how it's different to channeling and mediumship, because even though those can be incredibly useful, I don't want to give over my whole body to be taken over by somebody else's consciousness. I would prefer to retain sovereignty. And so at best, I'll be a translator, and I'll say like, okay, cool. So I've got your farm on the phone. Are there any questions you'd like to ask? And then I ask, and then I tell them what's going on. And then that's the way that I work, that I find is best for me. Does that answer the question enough?
Absolutely. A question off course, but totally on course, but not planned. But these are sometimes the most interesting ones. In the 10 years, how have you found, because you mentioned that the world is full of animal communicators, and given your background, you wanted to focus on nature communication. How do you feel the awareness of nature communication has grown since the time that you have started?
A huge amount, I'm so glad to say. A really, really huge amount. Like, I remember when doing my very first animal communication workshop with Anna Breitenbach, now just over like 10 and a half years ago, nearly 11 years ago, actually. I remember how she would talk about how she didn't feel comfortable even speaking about it for 6 months after she first did the workshop. I was totally different. I let my mouth run, which was not great because I was engaged at the time. And that relationship fell apart, probably for the best, because I became too weird. So it was that meeting that edge that made it a bit difficult. But now I'll talk to people, and maybe because I speak with such confidence in it that people don't even question the fact that it is a credible thing. And maybe they'd hide it and they just show either feigned or genuine interest in what it is. And so then I can speak with it with a bit more authority. And I'm not up to convince anybody anymore. I don't feel the need, I get so bored with having to convince anybody about this. I'm like, if you're interested and don't believe me, and I say the same to everybody here, don't believe anything I say. That would be lazy. Take it on board, see how it fits in with your worldview, practice things yourself, and then make up your own mind. Because for me, it was the same. All the scientific studies can mean diddly squat, because I know as a scientist how easy it would be to fudge the data. And the same could be done for animal communication or nature communication. So for me, it was experiential embodied evidence that changed my mind. And I think the more people are becoming open to having that experience, the more that people who you would never normally think of walking down the street being interested in this, now they are. Sidebar, what do I mean by nature? I mean not only the living beings who are in and on and around the earth, who we think of as being benevolent and visible, trees and plants and animals and insects and microbes and rocks, rivers, and so on. I also mean all of the non-physical nature that we cannot see. And so we might get into that a little bit later. Spoiler alert, we will. And I also mean all of those beings beyond Earth, the ones who are on the other stars, the stars themselves, other planets, possibly other dimensions, and so on. For me, nature includes Earth, and it is more, including God. I don't know if nature is God itself. It feels like it's a part of it. Close bracket. Thank you for listening.
I love your sidebar in defining what nature means to you, and appreciate your invitation for everyone to experience this for themselves and find out what is true. I'm delighted to hear how things have expanded. So, because we're all part of nature and humanity is an animal species too, how are all animals and their well-being affected by the energetic patterning that is actually held in the landscape and the health of the metaphysical ecosystem?
So many of us have experienced how when we walk into a room or into a building, we can get a sense of, ooh, this doesn't feel so good, or wow, this really feels beautiful and open and warm and welcoming and fuzzy, yay. And so the same is going to be true for animals, except that we know that they are far more sensitive. And so on a physical level, of course, well, the physical is informed by the energetic. You know, information from the energetic realm comes and it creates physical form through methods that I'm not 100%, I don't really know exactly how it happens, but I know that it happens. And I've seen enough to believe that that is a real thing. It's that the energetic has, the physical always has energetic counterpart, but not the other way around always. So if the energetic patterning, for example, in a landscape isn't aligned with the human intention of that place, for example, the activity of, let's say, a restaurant or a church becomes a family house, then the elementals and the nature spirits, the non-physical counterparts of that ecosystem don't realize what they're meant to be supporting in terms of a new form of human activity there. So maybe, for example, it could be as benign as maybe it was a restaurant and there would have been that bustling energy with a lot of strangers moving in there, moving through there, and they would have been cooking and smells and money exchange and so on, like very different, with a lot of activity in a shorter period and then nothing for a longer period during the day, maybe, with seasonal things. Whereas a family home looks very different in terms of how does that feel to animals. And so if the nature spirits don't know what's going on, it means that the animals will pick up on the fact that the house actually still, let's call it, remembers being a different kind of place. So yeah, there are ways and means in which animals can pick up on that. However, there's more to it. Let's say, for example, the patterning of a place includes interference or trauma or damage caused by humans or not by humans. It may be there's an earthquake that's happened, or a flood, or a drought that will leave an indent, not an indent, like a patterning, will leave an imprint in the landscape, and animals pick that up in the same way that they will pick up when there's tension in a family. Many of us who work as animal communicators know that the animals will sometimes even mirror what's going on an energetic level in their bodies. They might even show the same symptoms in terms of physical illness that the humans in the house may already have or don't yet have, to show, like, I'm trying to show you something and you're not listening, or maybe you don't know how to listen. And so they pick up all kinds of things in a landscape, and these are just some of the examples. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes me think of, I know there's at least 3 of us here, Allison, Eleni, and myself, are members of the Heart Pride, which is a joint collaboration between Winter Worsthorn of Animal Talk Africa and Linda Tucker of the Global White Lion Protection Trust, in support of the White Lions, the Conservancy. And our work is not just with the animals, but it is also with the land. And we support animals and situations and lands, and even in the oceans. Sometimes we'll connect privately and we'll work with whales, for instance, that have beached. So absolutely, I think it makes sense. So how can we, as individuals, how can we affect change? How can we be supportive of other animals and animal-focused organizations by working with nature, specifically having conversations with nature spirits and elements of the land on which all animals live, ourselves included?
It can be tricky for people to even want to believe that these beings exist beyond the physical. So the first thing would be, I don't expect you to suddenly change your worldview and include them, but I invite you to be open to the idea of acknowledging that even though we cannot see someone, like a very small insect or microbe, or a star that doesn't glow brightly at night, doesn't mean they don't exist. And even the same is going to be true when we think that something doesn't believe, but don't want to believe that something exists, doesn't mean that they don't. So if we can bring ourselves to acknowledging that we're part of a wider ecosystem around us, which includes beings on the landscape who are non-physical, and I say who because in an animist worldview, which is something that many animal communicators or interspecies communicators hold, it means that everything becomes everyone. Everyone has agency, and that will include, soil, that will include rocks, it will include animals and trees and so on, all of it. And that includes the nature spirits and the elementals. Maybe I should also, again, sidebar, clarify. Nature spirits are the non-physical beings who will exist in and on and around a landscape. Sometimes people have different names for them, like in many of the European traditions, they would be thought of as like gnomes, for example, it's the earth elementals, or dryads if they're tree spirits. Whereas in India, a deva will be the name for that nature spirit. And there's a distinction between a nature spirit and an elemental. And nature spirit will be the ones who, and maybe first I should say, the elementals will be the ones like the fire beings, the water beings. So you might have a particular water spirit who is associated with a lake or with a river or with a particular ocean or waterfall. Whereas the nature spirits are them as well as everyone else. So you have nature spirits in your field as well. You will have a body protector, for example. You will have this sort of the spiritual counterpart of your different organs in your body. You could call those nature spirits as well. It could be that there's a spirit of an entire landscape. Like, for example, in biodynamic farming, we talk about a farm organism. And this is the being that is considered the overlighting or the overarching intelligence, the guardian of a place. And if we can acknowledge firstly that they exist, that goes a long way towards growing the relationship. The second thing, and they need to be kept updated about what is going on. So the second thing is dialogue, because as it's fundamental to all relationships, we don't know what it is that they need to know without asking them. And then we can say to them what it is that we need and ask what they need. Now, because they don't have physical bodies and opposable thumbs and creative energy the way that we do, they cannot do certain things. And like a well-known thing in many of the places where, or people who work with the Celtic mythologies will know that the Fae, or the fairies, who are sometimes interchangeable with elves, depending on which worldview you're working with, they really like dairy because they cannot make it themselves. So butter, for example, and cheese, they really love that. And so doing little rituals or making offerings to them in the same way that we would feed our ancestors, they need looking after and nourishing. Everyone in this universe requires nourishment of some kind. And sometimes it will look like a physical gesture. Sometimes it will be song. Sometimes it will simply be the dialogue that's nourishing. In the same way that with our friends, just having a good conversation can feel nourishing. You feel calmer, you feel warm-hearted and fuzzy inside, and you feel closer. The same can be true with the nature spirits and the elementals. So doing that means that they can then do their job better, which is upholding and creating physical form in the landscape, and therefore looking after, meaning that the animals can be more relaxed, including human animals, and that things start to work towards a more harmonious way of being. And so mostly this is practiced by people who work in land healing, like geomancy or land whispering. But it really could be done by anybody, although it does require slight, how shall I say, like an add-on and an adjustment. The same principles apply, but there's a bit more that's needed before one delves into nature spirit communication.
So I'm curious, having listened to what you shared, Saskia, as an animal communicator, very often, whether I'm speaking with animal family members or wildlife or animals in care, each conversation is unique, but themes come up, repeated themes. And I'm wondering, as an example, if you could share with us if there are any common themes that have been coming up recently in the last few months or this year from nature spirits and elementals that humans, that you could share with us, please.
Yeah, I'm going to go there. Climate change. Okay. I've grown up my entire life believing that the earth needs saving. And those people who work very closely with nature know that the earth does not need saving. She is not dying. She goes through massive changes, but it would be hubris to think that we are solely responsible for what is going on with the climate. Of course, the climate is always changing in the same way that consciousness is always shifting. How it changes, though, is a different story, and what we do about it is a different thing entirely. A lot of what is becoming a mainstream narrative now seems to be focused around fear and guilt and shame. And every time I have tuned in with nature, and every time my students have tuned in with nature around this particular question, unexpected answers come up. From what I get and from what they get, the nature spirits do not want us to be sitting feeling guilty, feeling shameful, feeling fearful, because that stagnates our energy. It leaves us feeling numb or helpless, despairing, depressed, suicidal. And I've been there because of that. I have been in that place of feeling absolutely hateful of being human and wanting to die because I felt like there was nothing that could be done. And I'm telling you here now on this platform that every single time I've communicated with animals, with nature spirits, with land, with the stars, with my ancestors, what they want from us is to change our behavior, but to do that from a place of love, of joy, of ritual, of dance, ceremony, singing, drumming, offering food, finding pleasure in the company of each other, including with the more than humans, enjoying our life, because it's from a place of this feeling that more change is effective than by feeling bad about what we have done. And it doesn't deny the damage we have caused, not by any chance, and it doesn't justify it either. But what it does do is say, how are you going to change it? How are you going to change the being? Because the doing comes from the being. And that, by the way, is something that came through I was teaching a few weeks back in Dartmoor in the UK with an organization called Embercombe, and we did this residential week as part of the Twin Trail program. And one of the participants in the residential had never communicated with nature before. She's a young actress. She goes to, she has a communication with a tree or with the river, I can't remember which. Various beings, people had conversations with various beings throughout the week. But one thing she came back with is saying, I kept getting this message to just be. And I kept feeling frustrated because I have so much energy to do. What do I do with that energy then? And the message kept coming back of first learn to be. The doing comes from the being. And that has stuck with me as well. I love learning so much from my students as well, because everything that we are doing physically in the world will be influenced by our intention, the ground of being from which we relate. And so this, as many animal communicators will know, the personal development path is so parallel to how effective we are as nature communicators. Because if we're bringing our bias, our programming, our relationship dynamics, and our patterns to these conversations, it's going to very strongly influence what kind of information comes through, because it has to always come through our filters. And the stronger our filters, the less broad-minded the information that can come through. And so that would be the main message, is from the nature spirits and from the elementals in all realms and dimensions, both associated with our beloved earth as well as beyond, but especially the earth, especially the ancient ancestors of place, is to do the timeless things, to sit and be outside, and to firstly enjoy what is there, and then to be singing. It doesn't matter whether you believe you can sing or not, just make noise, melodic kinds of noise, and let that be the gift. Dance, regardless of whether you feel you can dance or not. If you like drumming or if you like making music, do these as gifts, as offerings of gratitude. That is what nourishes them, because they cannot do these themselves. That is how we nourish them. That's how we stitch the world together again. That was the theme. Love being human.
Yeah. Thank you for going there, Saskia. One more spontaneous question before finishing up with our two formal questions. This is a big question. However, if you could simplify it to its essence, and I think you've given a lot of this already in your previous answer of messages. So somebody's brand new to intuitive interspecies communication, whether with animals, nature, whatever. How would you explain what that communication is to somebody who's a beginner? And how would you, secondly, tell them how to get started? So I know that today we don't have the breadth and the depth or the space or the time, but I would just like a sidebar for what is this intuitive interspecies communication and how do we get started?
It's a good question. And what I will say is, firstly, you are nature communicators, because you speak with humans all the time and humans are nature, and therefore nature communicators. Tick, you've done the first thing. Secondly, knowing that it goes beyond verbal communication. It can include verbal communication, but of course, there are few beings in this world who can use language the way that we do. So it includes all of our classical senses, the seeing and the hearing and the feeling and the tasting and the smelling and so on, as well as those inner aspects of those senses, our inner vision, our inner hearing. So information or messages, impulses might come through those, let's call them channels of information transfer. So you might get things through your inner vision, which is going to be informed by your imagination. And indeed, your imagination, your intuition, your inspiration, these are ways in which information comes through as well. You might get feelings, sensations, emotions. It might be through dreams. It might be through synchronicities and symbols that happen in nature. Basically, the way that I describe nature communication is two-way dialogue, because some people don't always understand that dialogue means both speaking and listening, with a wider range of senses and awareness. So we're listening with more of ourselves. And so a good way to get started is by dropping our awareness as much as possible into the heart, which automatically switches on a way of listening where our brains drop from beta to alpha. So this is slowing down the frequency of the brain so that more of ourselves come online and we can start to listen with aspects of ourselves that we all have capacities of. It's really just a forgotten capacity for many. So rediscovering that can take some time. Some people have beginner's luck like me in a workshop, and they get stuff right from the beginning that the information they can validate with others. And that intersubjective validation is something that is fantastic because nobody can steal that experience from you. They can't explain it away when it's information you have never would have known. Like, for example, getting information from an animal through a photograph and being able to verify that that information is true when there's no way you would have known what that information was previously. Of course, there are many people who teach animal and nature communication more broadly in the world, like Christine, like myself, like many others. I also have on the Ecofluency website a list of people who do this under other voices. So check them out if the way that I'm describing this work doesn't appeal to you. But you can do it in many ways. There are books, there are courses. You might just find actually you've been doing this anyway without consciously being aware of it. And so for some people, it's more a matter of starting to discern how much of what is coming through is from that tree, or could it also be from the landscape, or could it also be from my ancestors? Is it from myself? So learning the discernment between one's own ecosystem and the other being. And of course, that's an ongoing lifelong exploration of like, where do I end and the other starts? And maybe there's never an answer for that. But recognizing that once you start on this path, it's going to be very hard to go back. You can't unknow once you know about this, or once you've had your own first experience of it. or first experiences, like 10 years down the line, 11 years down the line, I still have doubt. I still think to myself, did I just make that up? And so it helps sometimes when I get validation from a client afterwards and know that I'm on the right track. So it's supernatural, like Anna Breitenbach says, as in ordinary, very natural. It's immediate. The information comes through. It's irrespective of time and space and distance. You can communicate with beings who are dead. You can communicate with beings in other dimensions, across the world. It doesn't matter who you choose to communicate with. It could be like clods of compost or constellations of stars, or like tiny little seedlings or really big towering trees. The same thing is true. You know, tiny little insects or like whales. They're all life. They're all life, and life doesn't mean that you have to be breathing and living. They're all nature, and because we're nature, it's our birthright.
Thank you, Saskia, for the spontaneity. No more spontaneity. 2 more questions, and then we'll move into our experiential portion of the conversation. Can you tell us and share with us, what's the reason that you place so much emphasis on energetic safety during nature communication and including with animals?
So, as I've mentioned, nature communication, including animal communication, uses a wider range of senses and awareness, which means that you are sometimes, by opening up, so to say, you are dropping the usual shields that you would have, which allow us to perceive the differences of what is ours and what is somebody else's. And I've had that right in the first year of my animal communication practice, where I asked an animal what was going on for her, a cat, and she had a throbbing headache because she didn't have enough water in her place. The person had forgotten to fill up the water bowl. And so she had a dehydration headache, which I didn't know was possible for cats. And I thanked her and I said I'd pass on the information. And I forgot to close off that conversation and ended up having the same headache for like 3 days afterwards, and headache tablets didn't work. So I was wondering what was going on. And then suddenly it dawned on me, oh, the cat had a headache. That information transfer channel is still open. And so once I closed that off, the headache went away. So just on a very basic level, that will be what one could call energetic safety. Although that's really at a very basic level, because that's just keeping conversations discreet, which in the modern world is a bit more challenging because we tend to forget about opening and closing conversations with ongoing WhatsApp messages, for example. So think of it a little bit like a Zoom call where you forget to press the end meeting button. And then that's just awkward and potentially dangerous, because there are beings in this world, like I've mentioned, nature is more than the benevolent ones. And in the same way that you have beings who are bigger and wiser and older and cleverer and stronger than us, we also have those who are bigger and older and cleverer and stronger and meaner than us. And at best, same like with worms, same like with ticks and fleas and so on, sometimes they're just parasitic. And like I said, everybody in this universe wants nourishment. So they might be latching into your energy field to be sapping on your energy in a different way, because that's how they survive. At worst, they would like to cause drama for you, and that can be really dangerous. So as an animal communicator, you are automatically working in astral realms. You are working in realms beyond the physical, because you're communicating at a distance. You're working on a quantum level often, also if you do healing. So having clarity in your own energy field means that whatever's in your field doesn't distort the messages and information coming through. And this has come up actually in 2 international events. Last year, Conversations with Nature World Summit, that well-known animal communicator P. Horsley runs every year. She had a very interesting interview with a very good friend and teacher of mine, Emma Farrell. And in that interview, it came up around energetic safety and psychic hygiene. And P actually said in that recorded interview, so many of his students worry about psychic attack, but that thread wasn't continued in the interview, so I don't know what happened with it. But I find it curious that many animal communicators don't address this in their work or in their teaching, sometimes because it's too sticky a subject. But then what was interesting is that this year in the Multi-Species Research Method Symposium that was organized by Professor MJ Barrett, which is I think where you and I met, Christine, or made contact, there was one particular panel talk that I found very curious. And I don't know if you were present, Christine, or not, but I asked the question about energetic safety and about how that affects the clarity and integrity of messages that come through. And from what I remember, all the panelists agreed, but then there were some well-known animal communicators who were part of the audience who didn't agree. And they believed that being in their heart and not believing in evil things or choosing to believe that they were safe from them was enough. I would argue from experience that that is how I have behaved, and it didn't work. I can believe that bad things will never happen to me, but I think that the universe is more complex than that. And if nothing bad ever happens to you, you're not going to learn. So I'd like to think that once we know better, we need to do better. So you might have your, let's call it spirit team, look after you up until the fact that maybe you watch this interview and you're like, oh, damn, now I need to do better. Now I actually know that this might be a problem. Sorry, not sorry. So the things that one can do are quite simple at times. But the reason I bring this up is that I think it's more important that I do speak about this. Whether or not you choose to believe it is entirely up to you, obviously. But at least you would have heard it at least once so that you can make up your own mind around this. And if you choose to believe that this is a possibility in your work, I say this not to put you off, but to tell you that working in these realms can have the potential of being dangerous, especially when you start working beyond animal communication and you start working with land communication and nature spirits, for example. Although inevitably I'm finding that animal communicators these days are having to do more work than what they ordinarily would have stuck to. And especially when you're doing like healing work, for example, facilitating a healing journey for the people and or the animals. That's my point with all of this. I don't expect you to believe it, but I have from experience, I'll tell you a very quick story to illustrate this. During the 2020 lockdowns, I found myself in Wales at my partner's friend's small holding. And we stayed there for obviously for the whole 2.5 months in the UK. I don't know how long lockdown is. We were there for 2.5 months. And so we made pilgrimage to some of the churches in the vicinity because there's a legend around the fact that if you go and you destroy those churches, then the last dragon that was put to sleep in the UK was in that particular ring of churches, St. Michael churches, then the dragon will come to life. Now, we weren't going to go and destroy churches, obviously, but we were just curious what energies would pick up if we went to these churches. Now, without knowing how to do that properly and safely, this is communicating with nature spirits without safety measure, didn't realize what I was doing, came back and started having panic attacks and anxiety and all kinds of things that I'd never had in my life before. When I spoke to some of my teachers about it and ended up having to have a psychic clearing, it went away immediately. And it turns out that I had picked up all kinds of things on that pilgrimage without realizing it. And so our personal wounds become the doorways for these things to enter. And it's not to say that they will always come back. It's a both and situation rather than an either or. They both are a result of us having a particular way of thinking as well as being separate things in themselves. And so the more we work on our own self and our own wounding and our own healing, the less likely we are to pick up things like that. But they often come in as messengers in the same way that microbes come in as messengers. You might continually have an infection that's trying to tell you something about some imbalance in your ecosystem. The same is going to be true in terms of your immune system on an energetic level. So this is why I place so much emphasis on the energetic safety as well as on the psychic hygiene level, because in order for us to, with true clarity and integrity, as well as for the safety of ourselves and of other vulnerable people whose energy fields we might be in the vicinity of, I think that this is really important in nature communication. Rather to say, it's not putting you off, it's to say, well, here's the handbook, like here's the highway code. Now you can go drive, but do so safely, rather than don't drive at all, if that makes sense.
It does, Saskia. And I think it leads us beautifully into our last question, which I'm wondering if you feel comfortable blending that into the experiential portion. So I'll ask the question and turn it over to you of answering that question and taking us into the exercise before we open up the Q&A. So the question being, with energetic safety, we also need energetic clearing. So can anyone practicing animal communication do energy clearing work? And if so, how? So that's a perfect lead in to share how to do it and take us through an exercise. Thank you.
Sure. Firstly, it would be unwise to attempt doing clearing work for anybody else without proper experience and training, simply because I have found that you could work, with whatever arises. You could work and believe that you're trained by spirit to do that. But if you're not clear when you say you're being trained by spirit and you don't know exactly who it is you're tuning into that's giving you information, it might not be those who are tuned with your highest and deepest well-being who are telling you to do certain things. And I've seen this happen with too many people in my field, including one of my teachers who believed that he was being trained by the higher beings, and it turns out that he has almost gone mad. And so I would say start firstly by grounding and containing your own energy field, because that goes a long way to keeping your field clear and aligned, both for this work, but also for everyday life. It's really important and it's easy to do. By grounding and containing, I mean, you can feel what it's like if you, with intention, just clear intention, pull your energy in towards yourself and feel yourself being grounded. Imagining that your energy is sinking down lower in your body. So it's not over here or over here, but it's in your heart or even further down or even into the earth, ideally, so that you stay grounded. And containing it, meaning that you become aware of how to play with your energy field. Like you can make it really big if maybe you want more space around you in public transport, for example. You can feel that, you can push it out and people will give you automatically more space. Or maybe you want more space, but you don't want other people walking through your energy field. You can pull it in tight around yourself so that you're not picking up psychic debris from them as you walk past. There are many different ways of working with this that's only limited by your imagination. But having at least some clear protocols and frameworks to start with helps before you start to become creative. So grounding and containing is really important. Secondly, clearing and maintaining the health of your energy field means that you're looking after your mental and emotional well-being, which helps then also with your spiritual development, because then you don't have things blocking your way. Like, for example, in my work with psychic clearings or energy clearings, I find that it might be that somebody has energies or entities even in their field who are misaligned with their highest and deepest well-being. And they would have come in because of a certain traumatic event or some kind of emotional wound that they've picked up from their family members or inherited from their ancestors or from even another life experience, if that's part of your worldview. And removing that energy or entity means that they're not stuck in a particular pattern of thinking. So they're not cycling in the same hamster wheel of what's going on for them. And so then they can start moving on with their life, and their spiritual development can continue and grow almost exponentially sometimes after that. And things fall into place more synchronistically. And this is just as important, but this takes a bit of training to do properly. I had to learn the hard way to not just work with whatever arises. It helps to have, you can, and sometimes I still do, but it does help to have some clear things in place, because like I said, there are some beings in this universe who will present as a different being, and you think you're working with somebody benevolent. Meanwhile, they're not so benevolent. At least that's my experience of it. But to start with, you certainly can clear your own energy field. And this already makes a big difference, both in your own practice and your own work of animal communication, but also in your everyday life. One might find that you feel calmer, you feel healthier, you feel more energized. Your relationships start to feel more at ease. Your animals around you are calmer. You feel just generally better, stronger, more grounded. So we're going to do a little practice. And I'm so glad that I get to share this. And it is, the basis of it is a practice that was taught to one of my teacher's teachers. So I learned this from one of my teachers and friends, Emma Farrell, and it was taught to her by her teacher, David Leasley. And what's really beautiful is that it empowers one to start becoming aware of your own energy field and to start both perceiving it. And if you're not so much into visualization, maybe you struggle with visualization, you can be working with feeling as a way of tuning into the subtle energy level and awakening the super sensible perception. So some people are better with creating through feeling as opposed to observing through inner visualization, or perceiving what's going on just through their body. So they might be clairsentient as opposed to clairvoyant or clairaudient. So for this, I invite you to, wherever you are sitting, to sit with your back a little bit more straight. So if you have your hands to your side, let's say hanging just down your side, and normally your palms would be facing you, your body. What happens if you just turn your palms to face the front? Notice what that does to your posture, to the relationship between your shoulders and your neck and your head. Another way of doing this would be to tuck your elbows into your side and have your forearms swiveling out to the side. And then what happens if your forearms in front of you? What happens if you just have them 90 degrees to the side? What does that do to your posture? And notice how it makes you feel. Allow that your belly starts to relax. And with a relaxed belly, let your belly expand as you breathe in. This gives more space to your internal organs. It allows them to sit more comfortably in your abdomen. And that means that the diaphragm, that muscle that sits curved underneath your lungs above your stomach, it can pull down as you breathe in. It contracts. And as it pulls down, your lungs expand. So this fills your lungs with more air, more inspiration. It also keeps your awareness focused rather in your abdomen area as opposed to your chest or your head. As you breathe out, allow that your stomach contracts. And that pushes your diaphragm back up against your lungs, and your lungs empty out the air. You can take it a step further and start breathing in as if the air is coming in through your heart space, still with a soft stomach. And as the air comes in through your heart space, imagine or feel how it fills not only your lungs and all of your cells with more oxygen and inspiration, but it fills all of your being, all the parts of yourself beyond your physical, your etheric, mental, spiritual aspects of yourself as well. Emotional. And as you breathe out this time, allow that whatever wants to be let go of from your body or your more than physical self gets pulled down through your spine, down, through into the earth. Allow that the earth composts that. She knows better than us how to do that. And as she transmutes and she transforms this, allow that as you breathe in again, it comes in through your heart space. With a soft belly, allow that your lungs expand. All of you expands. And as you breathe out, let go of what needs to be let go of, out, down through your spine into the earth. Now what you can do is create, either through visualization or through feeling, create a golden thread that runs from the base of your spine down into the earth. And let it go as far as feels appropriate for you. Maybe it's a few centimeters, maybe it's a few meters, maybe it's all the way to the heart of the earth. And wherever you find the end of that string stopping, maybe you wish to expand it, maybe it becomes a cord or an entire tree root, but wherever it ends, let it branch out. And like roots, this grounds you more deeply into the soil. Notice how you feel in your body as you do that. And continue to breathe in through your heart and then down out through your spine into the earth. And you can send whatever needs to be let go of down this golden thread or cord, nourishing what is below, so that she may return that energy to you as inspiration. Fresh nourishment in the same way that we feed the earth with what we let go of, and as we eat the food that she provides for us. Let us do the same with our breath, allowing ourselves to let go. So as you breathe out, really breathe out. Let your breath be long and deep. Now you may wish to extend that golden thread from where it started at the base of your spine. Extend it up through your spine. Let it travel out through the top of your skull, out into the cosmos. And let it go as far as feels appropriate for you. Maybe it's the outer edge of the atmosphere. Maybe it's the edge of the solar system. Maybe it's the heart of the galaxy and beyond. Wherever you find that end of the thread stopping, let it branch out. And this time it becomes an antenna. These cosmic forces that you are picking up, allow that only those who are aligned with your highest and deepest well-being to travel down through this golden thread, down through your spine. And on the way, it nourishes you, and then it travels down into the earth. You are a bridge between above and below, between the earth and the sky. Now you can choose to sit with this feeling and breathe in a circular fashion with the earth, or you can choose to play with what happens if you were to breathe up and down this golden thread. It's up to you. The next step would be to start working with one of our energy circuits, our chakras, that is approximately an arm's length above your head. So you can put up your arm if you wish, and where your palm is, where your hand is, that is where your soul star chakra is. And it is this chakra, in addition to other parts of ourself, which connect us to divine forces, beyond cosmic forces. Feel what it's like to have this part of yourself be held in awareness. If you need a reminder of how your body's posture would like to be held, that is more open, you can tuck your elbows into the sides and swing your forearms out. Or you can just have your hands hanging at your side and just gently turn your palms to the front. We're now going to create 4 balls of golden energy, of golden light. You can call them orbs or spheres, whatever feels appropriate for you. And then we're going to drop them down into parts of the body that are known in the Celtic and in the Tao map of the energy bodies as the 3 cauldrons in the abdomen and in the heart or in the chest area and in the head area. These cavities in the body where there is both air but also capacity to accumulate energies that might be toxic, might be harmful to us. So we're going to clear those out. So with the very first ball, I'd like you to breathe in and create or visualize that there's this ball of light. And it's as big as you would like. Mine are usually about bowling ball size. And it's glowing incredibly brightly and beautifully. I like to picture something like supernova level brightness and power and beauty. So let it glow as brightly as possible. Breathing in as you do that. And as you breathe out, drop it down into the abdomen area and let it explode with the light going all the way around to your sides and below. And notice how you feel, and notice where does the light fill in your energy field. Are there spaces that it cannot reach? And without judgment, just be curious about that, but hold it as like a note, side note to yourself to explore later. Now we're creating a second ball of light in our soul star chakra, glowing beautiful, bright. Breathing in, illuminating it. As you breathe out, drop it down into your chest area, into your heart space, and explode it to the side all around you. And notice how you feel. And then with the third ball of light, let that glow illuminate as brightly and as beautifully as possible, like the first two. Breathe in, incredibly powerful light. As you breathe out, drop it into your head space, and this time let it explode to the side around you and upwards. Notice how you feel. And now we create the last and fourth ball of light. Breathe in. Make it as beautiful and as bright, powerful as you can. As you breathe out, drop it down again into your heart space, but this time it explodes and fills your entire energy field. And now, let the light keep filtering down, almost like it's liquid, filling every part of your energy field. And now it's draining down, pulling anything with it that needs to be let go from your field. And at the bottom of your field, imagine that there's a hole or plug that you can let it drain down into the earth for her to compost, emptying your energy field, having cleansed it with this light, like liquid gold. And when it's drained down to the bottom, close it or seal it or plug it, however feels comfortable for you. Make sure it's tightly sealed. And now start to become aware of the inside of your energy field. Or aura, if you prefer the word. But however you think of it, whatever terminology appeals to you, look at the space around you and notice the shape, the texture, the color, if it has any, whether it's clear or opaque. And look all around you and notice also if there are any tears or holes or rips that might be in the boundary. And with your intention, or your hands, or a wand, or a laser, whatever works for you, close those up, seal them. And you can additionally cleanse your field with fire, or water, or air, or crystalline energy. Let it whip through your field. Cleansing, cleaning, healing, sealing, concealing any part of it that needs that on all sides. If you're very literal like me and you can't see behind you, then you can spin your energy field on its axis vertically so that you're pulling the back to the front temporarily so you can see what's going on. Close up anything that needs closing up, cleansing, making sure that it's all good again. And then it'll turn back, which it'll probably do automatically. And notice how you feel. And when you feel ready, take another deep breath in through your heart, down and out through your spine into the earth. And before you open your eyes, firstly become aware of your energy field or of the space immediately around your body. Keep your awareness tightly focused there. And when you feel ready, open your eyes and keep your focus just around yourself. And then when you feel ready, in breath, through the heart, out breath, down the spine, into the earth. Expand your awareness to the sides, behind you, above you, underneath you, and then lastly, in front of you.
Thank you, Saskia, for that powerful exercise. We have about 10 minutes for our Q&A, and then we need to wrap up with your news. So I am going to open the chat again. And you have a choice of either entering a question, a comment about the conversation or the exercise in the chat, or raising your digital hand. It just makes it easier for Saskia and I to follow who's raised their hand in what order. And you do that by activating your dashboard on your device. You'll see a microphone and a video and a reactions button, a little smiley face. Touch the reactions button and you click on raise hand. So we have a question in the chat. Yeah. Rebecca asked Saskia, and I know I was not at that panel that you shared. Rebecca wanted to know which panel at the multi-species symposium that you were at or spoke at when you had that discussion you alluded to today.
I can't remember the name of the panel. If you email me afterwards, I can try and find it in the schedule. I did also speak at the panel, but that was under the practitioners. On the practitioners panel, it wasn't in the same one where this discussion was held.
Right, that would be great. So Rebecca, I'll make sure that you get the email for Saskia to reach her, because those of us who went to the symposium have access, I believe, for 6 months. So you can go back to that. Other questions, comments, or sharing about your experience for Saskia? Okay, let's see, we'll go with Karen first, please, and then Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, thanks for this. This is really awesome. I guess I'm curious, as a fellow academic, the combo that you bring of like PhDs and academia to this is really appealing and also really inspiring. I'm curious to hear about like how it was to bridge those worlds, both like in interaction with academia, but also I guess within myself, it feels a little bit like the scientist is battling with the intuitive. And I know that they don't need to be separate, but one feels like it's kind of dampening the other. So I'm curious if you could speak to that a bit.
That's a good question. Thank you, Karen. If we think about it, we've been programmed in a particular worldview, a materialist worldview, for a long time, you know, for most of our lives, for many of us, because we've grown up in a westernized culture, which is informed by Western, modern European science. And what I learned is that it took experience to shift that worldview. It took me having my own embodied experiences to take on board what logically made sense and energetically felt right, but that I couldn't take on board just because somebody said something. Like, we're trained so much to look at the evidence, you know, do the research. It's like, well, my research had to become embodied. And according to many people who work in this field, they found the same thing. So one has to have had one's own experience of it before things can start to shift. And then your own ontology, which is where you believe reality is to be, and your epistemology, which is how you believe reality can be learned about, that starts to shift. But if the ontology remains materialistic, it's always going to be at odds with an ontology that is animistic. So I would invite you to develop your own bank of experiences, to have a journal that you can keep a record of whenever you start to have doubt. Have people who you can speak to about this. It doesn't have to just be very woo. You know, I didn't have any academics at the time who were into this at all. I felt like a total outsider, but I was fine with that. It was more like, well, I'm going to rather go with what animals and trees have to say about this than what the humans have to say, because you clearly have got something wrong with the way you're behaving in the world. Yeah.
Great question. Thank you, Saskia. Rebecca, go ahead with your question for Saskia, please.
Sorry, it wasn't so much a question. I was thinking about what Saskia was sharing about elementals and nature spirits and working with them on our own, maybe our own piece of land or area. And I had used a trail cam one winter about, I guess it's 3 winters ago now, right at the beginning of the COVID stuff. I decided to try to capture the animals that were moving past my home in suburbia, because I saw the prints of a female fisher and I was like excited to try to see her live. And I collected so much stuff because I thought I would do something with it. And but what I found or saw, not with every animals that came through, but particularly with raccoons, that there were often orbs that followed them. Like a few minutes behind, orbs would follow the group of animals that had walked through, and once visited my camera and checked it out. And so I think that we can't see these beings necessarily, but sometimes our technologies can accidentally pick them up, and you find out that they're there. And sometimes now I'll look at trail cam footage, nighttime stuff, to see if anybody else is capturing them, and sometimes they show up there too. So I just wanted to share that, like we can sometimes find that we can see these things.
It's so true. The human eye can only see a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. And so that's when our imagination has to come online, because the nature spirits will project into our inner vision something that would be appropriate for our frame of reference to feel familiar with, because they cannot push themselves into physical reality. It takes a lot of energy for them to even present in our imagination. So the less we become attached to seeing them, for them to prove their existence, the more they can relax and actually just engage in the conversation and relationship. Yeah.
I'm so glad you, thank you, Rebecca. That was a beautiful share. I'm so glad you shared that with us. That was great. Saskia, I have question in the chat for you from Melissa, who asks, do you think the increase in people becoming animal communicators is related to what's happening astrologically?
Yeah, I've heard it from a number of astrologers that it is certainly the case, that there's like a potential, it's part of human evolution. It's like, it's inevitable, but it's happening. And so I'm like, yay, it's happening whether we want it or not. Yeah, it makes our job easier as nature communicators.
You're right on track, Melissa. We have time for one last question. If anybody is thinking that they would like to ask, share, relate something to Saskia, someone who hasn't spoken, anyone?
Also curious how that particular exercise landed with people, because I know that it can be quite strange. So hands up if you liked it or felt that you felt something. Yay.
I'm getting
Good.
some hearts too.
Yeah, it was good. That's good news. And if you think that's also okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, but feel free to email me afterwards with any critique or feedback about it so that this work keeps evolving. You know, I like hearing how things change.
So we have actually two more questions. We'll honor, Robin raised her hand, but we'll go first to the chat. Laura says, Saskia, what's the difference between an animal empath and an animal communicator?
That is a good question. The first thing that comes to mind, knowing that I might not answer this on behalf of an animal empath, because I don't consider myself one. It took me years to develop the capacity to be doing the communication. An animal empath would be somebody who will automatically pick up things going on for that animal, whether it's emotions or physical sensations or feelings and so on, thoughts. Whereas an animal communicator would be somebody who is asking the animal what's going on for them and might still get the same information coming through, but there can be more often than not, more of a distinction between where that starts and ends. An animal empath will sometimes spontaneously get stuff, which can be tricky because then it's hard for you to close that down if you don't know how.
And I would, yeah, I think so. And I'll just add something to that, Laura. I think it depends on how you define an animal empath and how you define an animal communicator. Because like Saskia, I believe it's our birthright. We are all animal and nature communicators because we are animals ourselves and part of nature. How we communicate is unique because we're individual beings. We may have overlapping skills, and some people may be more empathic than others. And so that is a form of receiving information energetically. And Robin said, that was an accidental hand raise, that happens, but loved everything today. Thank you. So Saskia, before we close today, do you have any news you want to share with us? What you're doing, what you're offering these days?
Yes. So I have the only in-person public retreat that I'm offering in the UK before I go back to South Africa in mid-August. So for those who are interested and have the time and the capacity in the UK, that's going to be at a beautiful, beautiful regenerative estate called 42 Acres, and we'll be in the woodlands. So that is a weekend workshop and retreat in the wild. And so that's going to include Lunasa harvest festival ceremony on the Saturday night, because we're quite close to that harvest festival time, and a sauna ceremony on Friday night to cleanse ourselves. And we'll be going through those 9-step set of guidelines that I normally teach. And then we'll be doing a lot of practice, co-creating with the resident beavers and barn owls and so on the land, and doing quite a lot of physical, practical exercises in it so that you go home with your own embodied experience. And so bookings for that close early next week. Ideally, if you're interested, I'd book sooner than later. There are only a few spaces left, and it's going to be exquisite. It's like it's quite fancy. There's like everything, all the right on things, you know, in terms of like biodynamic food, holistically prepared, all very yummy, very sensually nourishing weekend. So details for that are through the website under the courses, workshops and events website, or on 42 Acres on their website. So because they're taking the bookings directly. And then there are also some online courses coming up in September. The one that's on the Tuesday evening, 6-week online course, that one is full so far, unless there's a cancellation. But the Wednesday morning UK time, which might be difficult for people in the US, but might be easy for people like India and Australia, New Zealand, that maybe is more appropriate. But I will be offering more things in the future. So anybody who's interested in this work can just follow on social media and ideally be in the news, be on the newsletter mailing list, because that's where I advertise things. So you get first choice on these courses and workshops. And then I do also offer the online consultations, and the clearing work and the details for that are on the website as well. That's as far as I can remember right now. Thank you, Christine.
That sounds perfect. It's great to know how you offer your services. So tomorrow, 24 hours from the start of today's live event, please check your inbox for a follow-up email from me. It is going to have a time-sensitive link to the replay. Thanks to Saskia's permission, you can download this and use this for your personal use only. So you can go back and you can experience both the conversation as well as the exercise. You'll also get all the links that Saskia has mentioned today. So her website, how to reach her, and all of her socials. So if you want to follow what she's doing and see pictures from her beautiful retreat coming up from 42 acres. And a public replay beyond those that registered today, so whether you've shown live or you're going to be watching this replay, will become available next week, because you may have family and friends that you think, gee, I've attended this, they should know about it. So watch for that on my website, my newsletter, and my socials, because that will be at the reduced rate of $20 Canadian, because they don't get to participate in the live Q&A, and all the funds continue to support Ecofluency. So I just want to let you know what's coming up, and then we'll have a group goodbye and thank you. So I'm also honored that our next guest speaker is here, Eleni Gikakis, the founder and facilitator of Interspecies Peace, who's waving. She'll be joining us next month from Greece on August 26th. You can find it on the Conversations for Charity webpage on my website, christinenobleseller.com. And she will be speaking about animal communication, healing between animals and their humans, and sharing stories of her work over the last 20 years. So back to Saskia and today. Saskia, it was a complete honor to meet you. I have so enjoyed today's conversation and experiencing you and your work. I'm grateful for you speaking your truth and your experiences and sharing with us. I thank everyone that is here today in any capacity for supporting this. I will make the donation later today to Ecofluency, and the final amount will be in tomorrow's follow-up email. It is slightly over 500 Canadian dollars that will be going to Ecofluency. So I'd like everyone to unmute now, and this is your chance to thank Saskia personally and say goodbye.
And before we log off, after we
yes.
stop recording, if you want to hang out, then we'll do the closing, the energetic closing like we did at the beginning, the opening. So yeah, but that won't be recorded. So hang out afterwards if you want to.
For anyone that is able to. Okay.
Yes.
So for those that need to go, goodbye and thank you. And those who would like to stay, I will stop the recording shortly.